basic Photoshop fundamentals. I've already got Photoshop open here, and I'll do a very quick run around, if you will, of the section. Over here on the left we have our toolbar. Up here on the top we have what's called the options bar, which gives you more details on the specific tools. And then we have all our various panels. In this case I've got properties, color swatches, adjustments, the layer panel, which is critical, channels, and paths. Now if we want to add or delete panels from our interface, we can go up to Window, and you can see here a whole list of panels to choose from. For example, text for characters and paragraph, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just initiating a brand new file. I'll open a new file. I'll go up to File, New. And we get this dialog box. And very quickly, let me just talk about resolutions, if you will. In the general sense, we have high res and low res. When it comes to creating graphics using Photoshop, when we want to go to print media, we would use high resolution. And let me go to presets to help explain that. We've got US paper, which is a preset for US letter size paper intended to be used for print production. Now if we look down at the various properties here, it's measured in inches right now. I can change that to pixels, but for print, inches makes sense. And resolution, which is very important. For print media, go into pre-press or go into press, it's 300 pixels per inch. For print mode, go into press, we would actually use CMYK color, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which are the 4 color plates used on your conventional printing press. For all other uses, for digital use, we would use RGB color. Now let me go to the other preset, which is for web. So anything we'd create for websites or anything that would go online, we'd be using web. And you can see here it has a conventional 800 by 600 pixel image size. We are measuring using pixels. And our resolution for web, which is a standard screen resolution, this is what it's based on, is 72 pixels per inch. And again, everything web is RGB color, which is red, green, blue. And in fact, RGB has a bigger color model. You can have more colors in an RGB color model than a CMYK model. And the background we can choose, but by default it has a white background. So I'm going to choose this web preset and create a new file based on it. I can give it a name. I'll just call it Photoshop Fundamentals and click OK. I got a blank canvas here, if you will. 800 by 300, or rather 800 by 600 pixels. Now I can see here up here my ruler is in inches. If I want to change that to pixels, which I would probably do if I'm doing web-oriented work, I'm on the Mac, I can hold my control key down and choose pixels. If it's on the PC, you would hold down your control key as well. If I want to change it back, it'd be inches. Okay. Now again, over here I have my basic layer. It's known as a background layer. I'm just going to fill this with color. I can go to my color palette here and just choose a color. I'll just choose this bright blue. You can see here I have a foreground color chip and a background color chip. I'm simply going to fill my canvas space with this blue color. Edit, fill, foreground color, normal mode, 100% opacity, and OK. Now I'm actually going to open a file, picture of a car, and we'll take a look at that. Click open, and there's my picture of a car. Happens to be a JPEG image. And if I want to know the image size, I do have the rulers, of course. But I can also go up to image, image size. And I can not only determine the size, I can actually change the size of my image if I wanted to here. If I want to change that to, actually if I want to resample it, I click resample. Resample means scaling it up or down, which it means it's either going to be removing pixels from the image if it's scaling down, or adding pixels to the image if it's going larger, which is also known as sampling up or scaling up. Now I can see my pixel dimensions up here. If I wanted to change this with the chain connected, it's going to be constrained to the proportions. Let's say I wanted to make it 500 pixels wide. You see now my height will be 333. And I can click OK. And it actually reduced the size of my image. Let me undo that. Control Z on the PC, Command Z on the Mac. Let's say I want to do a few things to this. Maybe I'll just change the quality of the image. I'll go to Image Adjustments. And let's go to Curves maybe, or rather Levels. And we'll be doing this more extensively in another lesson, but just to quickly make a change, I can change my medium tones and make them darker, for example. Now the reason I'm doing this is I want to demonstrate not only the undo command. I can go edit undo or edit redo, but let me do a couple more steps here. Let me do another change, adjustment, hue saturation, and I'll just super saturate this thing. Click OK. Now I've done 2 steps here. If I wanted to go back 2 steps, I can do the step backwards as many times as I want to go backwards, and now we're back to our original image. And I can also step back in a forward direction to redo the moves I just did. So again, I've got the option to step backwards and step forwards. Let me introduce to you another panel which will do this in a bit of a quicker way. We've got our history panel right here. And if you don't see it over on the side, you can go up to Window and choose History. And you can see here I've basically got 3 steps. I can click on any one of these steps and it brings me back to that phase of the operation, if you will. Here's another cool thing. There's a brush over here called the History brush. Let me select the History brush. Then when I go back to my History palette, I'm going to click on this little box, which means that when I paint on top of this using the brush, it's going to paint back to that level. So let me give you an example. I imagine it's going to go lighter. So if I click on here, you can see I'm just sort of doing this paintbrush, but it's painting back to that original file as it was before I did those color adjustments. You can see here it's sort of subtle, but I'm painting back to a previous state of my file, which is very powerful. Now you can see each one of these history brushes became a step. So if I actually want to go back to where it was when I changed everything, I can just simply go back to that step in the history, or go back to my most recent step. Now if I want to paint back some of this stuff, basically undoing what I did with the paintbrush, I can just use my brush and go back over this with my brush icon set at the level that I want to return to. Again, if I don't like what I did, I can just simply click to any one of these steps to go back to where I was. Very powerful indeed. Now let me talk about canvas size. I'm going to go up to my image, pull down, and we've got a thing called canvas size. Canvas size is basically the area of my image, and it's measured in pixels typically. We can't change it, but pixels is what I want to do. I can add or cut away from this image. It's not changing the size of my file, but it's adding more pixels to the edges or to an edge, depending on where I set my anchor. Currently my anchor is in the middle, so let me just make it 1000 by 1000 pixels and demonstrate what this does. So I'm adding more area to my canvas. When I click OK, you can see that it added all around my image. Let me undo that. By the way, it's white because my background color chip is set to white. It will adopt whatever background color you have set. Back to image canvas size. Now if I wanted to say keep my car at the bottom of the canvas, I would click on the bottom corner or bottom center. I'll say bottom. I'll actually go bottom corner in this case. And again, I'll make it 1000 by 1000 pixels. Click OK. And you can see here that it kept it snug to the bottom left and added the 1000 pixels to the top and to the right. Okay, so that's canvas size. Let me undo that again by going Control Z on my keyboard. Now I do also have the option of rotating my image, as you can see here. And I can do it in various steps. Or I can go arbitrary and just actually pull it. Now one last thing I'm going to go over quickly here is a feature known as raster images versus vector images. Raster images are images based on pixels, which is most of the time what we're going to use in Photoshop. But we do have the ability to create vector graphics, and in fact the text tool generates our text as vector. In a brief explanation, vector is made up of lines and fills and points, and it's all mathematical, and it's infinitely scalable without increasing the file size, if you will. So for smooth curves that I might want to change the size of in shapes, definitely using a vector tool to create vector graphics would be to my advantage. Let me zoom up here. I'm going to actually go to my magnifying glass and just zoom right in very closely. And we're looking at the pixels which make up the image. If I hold my Option key down on the Mac, it'd be the Alt key on the PC, and zoom out, you can slowly see as I reduce this image, we're going to lose sight of the pixels at a certain point, and it'll just become blended colors, as you can see here. Now if I zoom in on the red part, they're going to be smoother looking. But really you can see the pixels on these curved elements. You can see it's like a staircase. And these are what make up raster images. So a high definition image would have more of these pixels compressed into an inch, and it's known as lines per inch, or pixels per inch rather. A low resolution image would have fewer pixels per inch, to the point where I could conceivably actually see each square known as a pixel in my image. Now I can go Command 1 on the Mac to go actual size 100%, and again when I go to image size, sampling would change that. So if I wanted to make this very low res, I could change my 300 pixels per inch to 72, for example, and you're going to see a real big degradation. You also notice the file size goes considerably smaller. But now if I zoom up, you see how pixelated that now looks. I just did an undo, so now my image is back to its original resolution. So that's raster images and pixels per inch. So it has to do with quality of image. Higher resolution have more pixels within an inch, to the point where, if you, for example, if you're looking at retina display, they're so small they're indistinguishable to the eye and things are perfectly smooth. And that's just a brief overview of some of the fundamentals in Photoshop to create graphics.